Good evening, I'm Jack Fujii, and welcome to the 5th session of Agriculture 194Q, Focus on Agriculture. Agriculture 194Q is a one-credit course offered by the College of Agriculture, Forestry, and Natural Resource Management here at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And also, we are coming to you live from the television studios located in the Mookini Library here on the University of Hawaii at Hilo campus. This evening, we hope that you'll stay tuned. We have a very interesting presentation. We have with us this evening Dr. Walter Kunitaki, who is the owner and manager of the Samurai Coffee Company in Holualoa on the west side of the island. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Focus on Agriculture is a course to inform you about the various aspects of diversified agriculture in the state of Hawaii. And each semester we focus on a different subject area. And this semester we're focusing on international flavors, and we're featuring various cooks and chefs throughout the Big Island here. Before we go on, I'd like to make a few announcements, and if I may have the Elmo, if you have any questions regarding Focus on Agriculture, or if you have any questions regarding the University of Hawaii at Hilo, please give me a call at 974-7674, or fax number is 974-7674, or you can call me at 974-7393. Or those of you on the internet, you can get a hold of me at jfujii@hawaii.edu. So if you have any questions regarding the University of Hawaii at Hilo, you can get a hold of me and I will put you in touch with the right person. Or if you want to write me, you can write to me at 200 West Kauili Street, Hilo, Hawaii, 96720-4091. Also, I'd like to remind you that come Saturday, November 14th, a little ways down the road, there's going to be a workshop on bamboo utilization, preservation, production, and management on a commercial scale. And this will be held at the Orchid Village Restaurant on Saturday, November 14th from 12 to 4 p.m. If you are interested, please give a call to the following number, 959-4150. Since we are coming to you live this evening at approximately 8 p.m., those of you in the viewing audience, and of course those of you here in the studio, will have an opportunity to call in and ask questions. For those of you on the outer islands, we will have a special number that you can call us collect. And of course, those of you here on the Big Island can call us direct. And as I indicated earlier, we have another very interesting presentation this evening. You'll know everything from A to Z of coffee, especially Kona coffee. And we have with us this evening Dr. Walter Kunitaki, who's not only a professor of accounting here at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, but he also owns a Samurai Coffee Company located in Holualoa on the west side of the island. So at this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Walter, Walter Kunitaki. So Walter, why don't you take over?
Thank you, Jack. Just one clarification here. You know, I've been with the university for many years, so I'm taking a stab at trying to explain coffee. You know, I'm a third-generation coffee grower in Kona, but in terms of what I'm going to present here, it's some little experience that I got in the last year and a half. Generally, when customers come into the store, what I tell them is I'm going to give them a coffee 101. And we start from the beginning and go all the way through. So tonight what I'm going to try to do is talk about growing of coffee in Kona, talking about the processing, maybe a little bit about roasting, a little bit about grinding coffee, how to brew, how to store coffee, and how to enjoy coffee, drinking pure Kona coffee. Just a little background on myself regarding the family growing coffee. My grandfather started Kona coffee growing in 1910. And actually, they moved from Kau to Kona and came directly onto a Kona coffee farm. And some of the trees that were planted back in 1910, we still harvest from the same trees. So Kona is very blessed in that we are able to harvest from the very same tree for a long, long time, whereas many other countries around the world, there's about 60 countries in the world that grow coffee. And many of the parts of the world cannot have coffee trees that last for 100 years. Somewhere between 20 to 30 years, they have to uproot the whole thing and replant. And so I guess the good volcanic soil and rock has high nutrition and minerals and so on to keep the plant sustained. Basically what I'm doing is I'm a professor in accounting, but I'm taking a leave from the university to go full-time coffee, so this is kind of fun right now. I'm in transition. Essentially, I have my own philosophies, and many of the things that I say tonight may be my own opinion. So, and coffee is, in a way, very subjective. You may think this is the best coffee you've ever had. Someone else might say someone else has the best coffee. So, someone like a dark roast, someone like a light roast, and so on. So, many of the things I'll say are my opinion. So, but one thing I think I can support is that Kona coffee is a good coffee. That's why I'm with it. One of the philosophies I have on growing coffee, now, you know, we're going to do some roasting and brewing and tasting coffee tonight, but what to me makes a good product, let's say even drinking coffee, it starts not from just getting any beans and then roasting and then having the coffee. To me, it comes from how you grow the product, from ground up, literally. So Kona Coffee used to grow their coffees very big. Everybody picked with ladders. Trees were somewhere between 15 to 20 feet tall. Industry has somewhat changed a little bit. I'm kind of an old school person in that I like my trees very big. So when I planted my trees, I made my trees very tall, and we still pick with ladders. Now, it's not that easy to pick with ladder because a lot of times picking in the fields with mosquitoes and staying on the ground is tough enough. And here you got to balance on a 6-7 foot ladder and then pick with the wind blowing. It's not easy. So to some degree, that's why people went with the shorter trees, convenience of picking. But bigger trees to me is you kind of imagine you got a little tree about this size. Well, what's the size of the roots? If you got a tree that big, you know, what's the size of the root system? And the root system is in many ways a big part of the feeding mechanism to the trees. And so the better the root system, the more matured the root system, the better it can feed. To me, it can sustain dry weather better than smaller root system trees. And when you drive around on dry weather time, you'll see the big trees are green and the little trees are dried up. Yeah. But anyway, that's my feeling. And essentially, what happens is that coffee will start producing after about 2 years, 3 years. In about the third year or the fourth year, you get actually a lot of production coming off the trees. Jack, maybe what you could do is, I do have a postcard that actually shows a tree that's 3 years old. So it kind of gives you an idea, after you plant a coffee tree, how much coffee can be on a tree. So this is in relation to the size of a French press, a basket of coffee. And the trees are actually 5, 6, 7, 8 feet tall. And as you can see, the tree has quite a bit of beans on it already. So the flowering generally happens somewhere between December through about May of each year. And I do have a photograph of the blossoms of coffee that was taken just this year for this year's crop. And it's referred to as the Kona snow. When coffee is in full bloom, it's referred to as Kona snow. So when you hear the word Kona snow, they're talking about the coffee blossoms. And coffee is related to the gardenia family, and so it does have a very sweet fragrance. And depending on the rainfall pattern, flowers will go from about December through May, about the intervals of maybe 3 to 4 weeks apart. And then the harvest season begins beginning around July or August. And this year we're getting very late in the harvest season because of the El Nino weather that we all suffered. So the flowering got very late. But if you figure from the day it flowers, depending on your elevation and how much rainfall you get, it takes somewhere between 7 to 8 months before you harvest the red beans from that flower that bloomed prior. Here I have a branch of coffee that has both ripe and green. And this kind of indicates to you what we're talking about in terms of different flowering and different size of beans and different levels of maturity. And the reason that you have different levels of maturity is because of the flowering. It was on different rainfalls and different intervals of the flowering. So you just figure out, we haven't started picking a whole lot in Kona, but we will be real soon. But I think the season this year will last through March in many parts because we're so late. So once you begin picking, what happens is that you start today and you never leave the field for months and months and months, because you start from this tree and then you go to the next tree, to the next tree, and by the time you get to the end of the lot, the tree that you started with is all ripe again. And they're all hand-picked in Kona. And that's one of the reasons why Kona coffee quality is very high, is that we do not mechanically harvest the coffee. It is very selective. You pick the ripe ones and put them in your big bags and bring them home. Some people ship it to the mill. I personally bring it to my own pulping machine and process my own coffee. My dad had 30 acres of coffee, so that's where I learned coffee. Generally, what happens is this. Coffee is hand-picked, put in sacks, brought home, and then there's a machine called the pulping machine. And basically what it does, it separates the coffee skin, the red coffee skin, from the slimy seeds. Now, what you see here is that the beans, the red beans, have a very shiny, slimy covering called the mucilage. And there's several ways you can take the mucilage off. And I remember the old days when my dad had a mechanical washer. Basically, there was a very turbulent banging of the plates against the beans, and that way it basically tore off the mucilage from the beans. But in that way, you also cracked a lot of beans. So generally, the method used is what they call a fermentation process. And if you just soak this coffee in its own juice and a little water, in about 8, 10, 12 hours, the mucilage has basically broken down, fermentation has taken place, and then the very next day, all you need to do is rinse and wash off the slime, and then you have a bean that's ready to dry without the slimy covering, the mucilage. Then when you sun dry it, there's different ways you can you can dry your beans, and there are mechanical ways, and there's the natural sun, and you can't beat the natural sun. It does wonders to doing your flavors. I mean, you probably heard about Opelo dried in the sun versus mechanical drying, and you know, the Opelo that's dried in the sun tastes much better, and same thing with coffee. It does add flavor. What happens, I think, is that it kills off a lot of the bacteria that's on the beans with the sun, whereas mechanical drying will probably not do that. So after it's dried, this is where we get the parchment. I've got some parchment here, as you can see on your screen. And essentially the reason it's called parchment is that it sounds like paper, and paper is parchment, as you know. And when you get to about what they call a 12% moisture level, it's dried. There's a regulation on by the state as to the level of moisture that the bean should contain. And in a way, these beans can last a very long time if you store it in the right condition. There was this, my brother told me he read something just not that long ago, about a year ago he read, and I'm still trying to track that article that he read. But what was very interesting was that he said that during the war, there was a shipment of parchment sent from Central America or Africa, and it was supposed to end up in Germany. But it got stuck in Japan someplace, a load of parchment. And 25 years later, this is discovered in this way corner of the warehouse, these bags of parchment that got stuck. And what they did was they couldn't find the rightful owner, so guess what they did? They processed it further, roasted it, and enjoyed it. And they said they'd never tasted coffee any better. And a gentleman that used to run the AMFAC coffee company down at the current Kona Beach Hotel, the King Kem Hotel, he ran a very big company. They were processing majority of Kona coffee at that time. And he said that he stored his parchment for about 10 years. And to some degree what happens is by storing the coffee for that many years, it kind of takes some of the edge off. It became very smooth coffee, smooth tasting coffee. So to some degree it's almost like wine. Okay. Then there's a machine called a huller. It basically takes the skin off the parchment, and what you'll see here on this next pile is that once the hulling has taken place, you'll have a bag full of green beans. Essentially, all we have here is we've got these dried guys, skin off, and once you take the skin off, it's called green beans. So green beans may be immature, unripened beans, and then after you take the parchment off, that's also referred to as green beans. And it's in this stage of green beans that coffee is shipped all over the world for the most part. Then the green beans are then graded. Now this is where the different names of grades come from. It comes from the size of the beans as well as the shape of the beans. So the bigger the bean, generally the less acidic. The smaller the bean, generally the smaller bean, more acidic. And the names of the coffee for Hawaii, this is a Hawaii Department of Ag grading system. This is not just a Kona grade or my own personal grading name, but this is a Hawaii Department of Ag grading system. And the smallest bean is called prime. I'm not sure if you're going to, I've got packages here that show the prime grade, which is the smallest bean. And then the next size bigger is called number 1. I believe what's happening here is that we've got glossy bags here, so we're not going to be able to catch that. So maybe what I'll just do is I'll just make reference to the names. But the size of the beans are going to be, prime is the smallest bean, then the next size is number 1, and then the next size is fancy, and the largest bean is extra fancy. So that is official names, and they have criteria as to what qualifies as fancy grade. So for example, the extra fancy grade goes through a little puka, a little hole of 19/64 of an inch in the green form, not in the parchment or not in the ripe form or not roasted, but in the green form, 19/64 of an inch. 18/64 of an inch is fancy grade. 16/64 is number 1. So they're graded by size. Then there is another grade called the peaberry. So Jack, maybe what we could do is show the round beans as compared to the beans that are 2 halves, and you'll notice that the parchment, even before you take it out into the green form, is a little different shape. And essentially what the peaberry is that it has a single bean instead of 2 beans per cherry, per red cherry. And notice the shape is a little roundish. And it comes from the same branch, essentially. And lots of people say, well, they like the Pea Bear the most because it's a more full-bodied tasting coffee as compared to, let's say, the real smooth, extra fancy tasting. So a lot of times when I have people coming to Kona, they say, well, I want to have Pea Bear because a lot of people are saying the Pea Bear is the best. But anyway, these are coming from the same branches, from the same tree. So we have all these different size beans and the shape from the very same branch. Okay, any questions so far from the floor? Pretty clear? Question?
Where does the pea berry fit between prime and medium? Or?
Okay, in terms of the size, there are actually two sizes of the pea bear. There's, in the grading system, there's a larger pea bear and a smaller pea bear. But it falls somewhere in between the number 1 and the fancy grade. It takes a little longer to roast with a popcorn popper for the fancy grade than it does for the pea berry. So I think that's an indication that it's a little bit bigger. One is a round shape and one is kind of like a flat and a rounded edge on the other side. Okay, now this is where we now transform the green beans to the roasted beans. So, you always see these bags. You don't see green beans in bags on the shelves, but you see roasted beans. So, for example, this is a example of the roasted bean. And essentially what it takes is a roasting hot air process, generally, that converts green beans to this. So, for example, the roaster that I have, they use 461 degrees for the particular roast that I prefer, for about 15 minutes. And that converts the unroasted coffee to the dark colored coffee bean. Now, if you think of it this way, now when you do a turkey for Thanksgiving, you're doing it for what, 350 degrees, 3 hours long, more or less, plus or minus. So this is a very fast conversion. In fact, you'll find tonight as we do a little roasting with our frying pan, you'll see a little smoke coming out here because you're burning it, essentially. What we can look at is the different roasts. The roasting terminologies are sometimes confusing because different people use different roasting terminologies. We have a small chart of roasting names. For example, sometimes you hear people talk about light roast, medium roast, dark roast, and the darkest roast. So if you can see that on your screen, a light roast, as pointed out by the top left-hand corner, are called different names. I don't have the sheet in my glasses at home. And then you get to the medium roast. You get the full city, and there are different people maybe calling it different names for the same roast. So when somebody say full city, in fact, the way some of these roasts are described, one person's full city might be a little different from someone else's full city roast. Then when you get to the dark roast, you're getting into the Vienna and so on. And then when you start hearing the roasts such as French and Italian and espresso roasts, those are really the dark roasts that lots of the espressos are roasted at. So now one of the confusion that happens is that they think that espresso is a particular roast, but because of the common usage as espresso roast, they're using that espresso roast as a dark roast. But espresso is really a brewing method, just like French pressing your coffee is a brewing method. Percolating your coffee is a method to brew. Dripping your coffee is a method to brew. And espresso is a method to brew. Basically, what I'm doing with my own personal roast is that I have it done at a kind of a medium dark roast. And that's, again, my personal palate that loves this particular roast. It's a roast that doesn't have a burnt taste, because when you have it roasted too much, it does burn, and you don't have the burnt taste. So I'm stopping it from what my personal palate tells me that it stopped just before it has a burnt taste, and that's what I have. Okay, maybe we'll have a little fun on doing some of these roasts. What we can do is roast by a frying pan method. Now there's different ways that you can roast at home by yourself. And let's see if I can get this fire lit here. You can roast with the oven, microwave, frying pan, but my favorite is the way to roast with the popcorn popper. And we'll do a little demonstration of that. So generally what you do is with the frying pan, try starting with the green beans in the frying pan from the beginning, so that the beans will warm up with the pan at the same time. Because if you try to get your pan to heat up very high first and then throw your beans in, then you're going to have it burnt real quick. And what you want is an even roast as much as you can get it. So what happens is that there's a disadvantage with the frying pan, because there is constant stirring. Basically what you need is a good pan with even heat. You need a spatula. Wooden one is the best one to work with. But you need to constantly stir it. Otherwise you're going to have one side black and the other side not yet done. And this is how it was done in many homes in the old days. That was the best way to do it, roasting at home in your frying pan.
So Walter, is it better to have a real thick pan, or can you do it in a wok?
Anything that gives you a even heat would be the best. You know, we were talking about this, Elle and I were talking about this today, and possibly a wok would be a good way to go, because on something like this, the frying pan, if you notice that these beans have a flat side to it for the most part. So once they get on the flat side, so to speak, it becomes very hard for them to turn over. And it's almost like a turtle. So anyway, I think a wok would do very well, where the shape of the pot will be kind of curved so that it's easier for the beans to flip over all the time, because stirring is a very critical stage, because the professional roasters, the commercial roasters, have a big, basically, wheel, and that's turning constantly. And that's giving the coffee beans a very even heat all around. But anyway, this takes a little time to get it roasted, but it does get your kitchen smelling pretty good. In fact, if not overpowering, sometimes like tuberose in the living room or something. So meantime, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to keep an eye on that pot. Like I said, you can also do this with your oven, a microwave. The microwave, there's a disadvantage, because for most of the microwaves, what happens is that the beams are shooting on one angle. So unless the beans get, even if you have the rotating one, you got those microwave where nothing moves, or you got those plates that rotate on the bottom. And even if they rotate on the bottom, the beam's just focusing on a very narrow area. So to some degree, you get burnt beans on one corner and untouched beans on the other, which gives you kind of too wide a variety of roasted beans. Oven will give you a better, more even heat than a microwave, because what you're doing is you're contained inside of a chamber, essentially, and the heat's even. But the disadvantage is you're going to have to stir every once in a while. You're going to have to go and shake it so that sometimes it's flipped over and so on. So oven, you can do it. Microwave, you can do it. And you can do it by the frying pan, but as you can see, I got to work here. But what you're also noticing, I'm not sure if the camera can see this in the frying pan, but the color of the beans are now begin to turn whitish, as opposed to what it was earlier. And the reason is that it's basically taking out the moisture from the beans. And it will begin to crackle like a popcorn. It won't jump out of the pot, but it will have an inflation. It will basically expand. Generally, the beans will expand almost twice the size. From the green state to the roasted state, you almost have the size of the bean double. However, you lose 20% by weight. So if you have a 1 pound of green beans that you roast, you'll have 80% weight left in roasted form. Speaking of the conversion of red cherry to roasted, it comes out like this. If you had 100 pounds of red cherry right off the tree, if you ran the process from red cherry to the parchment state, you'll get something like 23 pounds, somewhere around 23 pounds. 100 pounds of cherry will give you about 23 pounds of this. And then when you get it to this stage, you take the skin off, and now you're down to the green bean form. You've lost another 20%, so you're down to about 18 pounds of green beans. And then when you roast the green beans, and you hear the crackle on the beans, they're beginning to expand. You lose weight, although you expand in size, you lose another 20%. So you're down to around 15 to 16 pounds. So 100 pounds of red cherry that you work very, very hard for all day with mosquitoes attacking you, you're down to 15 pounds of roasted beans. Now, as you can hear, the beans are actually now crackling because they're expanding. The structure of the beans are now changing. There is, to some degree, there's really no taste or aroma of coffee up to the state of green beans. So if I gave you each a green bean and say, well, chew on it, you'll say bitter and not much more than that. It doesn't have this aroma or taste of coffee. But now what's happening is as the heat is applied to this bean, it's now changing the structure of the beans, and then this is where the aroma and the taste of coffee comes out. Can you smell it in the room here? Yeah. And that's basically what's happening, is that as it roasts now, this is where it's giving you the aroma. And you know, one of the things about food item, and coffee is no different, is that freshness is the key. I'm going to be very ambidextrous over here because I'm going to start a batch of roasting with the popcorn popper, because this takes a while with the frying pan and it will take a while with the popcorn popper. But this is my favorite in how you can roast green beans to your favorite roast of a light roast, medium roast, dark roast, and so on. So generally what you do is you figure out about how much green beans that you're going to use to brew. So now remember, you're going to be doing this every day at home, okay, because you want fresh coffee. Fresh roasted, fresh ground, fresh brewed. Essentially, what works best is a very simple popcorn popper. It's essentially a West Bend popcorn popper that has the bottom that rotates in a circular manner, goes this way. There are some popcorn poppers that blow upward with the hot air going straight up, but there are others, I don't know if you can see the angle, but you can see the bottom is flat, and there are baffles, air baffles that kind of go sideways. And so if I were to do this now, I'm going to try to get something going right here. I know this is a little noisy, so I'm going to move off to the side here. But I'm going to explain to you what's happening. If you look at the popcorn popper now, I'm going to really mess up the desk over here because there is a covering of silver skin on the green beans that you barely can see. And what it's going to be doing is that it won't blow the beans out, but you will blow out the silver skin or the membrane that covers the green bean that I just threw in. So right now I'm basically just messing up the table here, but I'm going to stop this. But it will take, depending on how closely you put it to your plug, and we'll see the transformation later on. You saw what we put in. If I can get a little assistance here and then continue this process, there's no need for anyone to mix the coffee. But what you have to do is you have to watch. Now, I want a Vienna roast, please. Well, if the machine wasn't, if the popcorn popper wasn't so noisy, we'd have it done right here. But we practiced before we got on this today, so we knew it was a little noisy. But what's really fun with the popcorn popper is this, that you don't have to stir. You don't have to take the silver skin out. And you don't have to forget about your frying pan being still on. And what happens is this, that now you see when you drive past a coffee mill along the coast, you'll see that there's actually literally a smokestack and smoke just fuming off. And the reason you have that is they're really burning the coffee. How am I doing, Jack?
I don't know. I see some dark ones here, Walter.
Well, I think for sure nobody's going to do the frying pan method. Yeah.
I think a wok would be pretty good, Walter. It's got a rounded bottom, so you can stir it around much better.
Yeah. No, well, for one thing, one of the requirements of a frying pan roast is you cannot stop stirring. It's a constant stir. Please take that in your notes. But if you do it on a very constant stir, you get a fairly even roast. I mean, this is how everybody did it before. They must have had more time. Yeah. What happens as you're roasting is this, that the more you roast, there's less caffeine in the coffee. You're roasting caffeine out of it. But it is not a decaffeinating process. Essentially, it's just one of those processes that are occurring in the process of roasting. So generally, the darker the roast, the less caffeine there is in the coffee. Some people can't handle caffeine. Some people love the caffeine. So, depends. It's preferential. But, as I said, that when we have this the frying pan method, you'll see the smoke. And this is basically what's happening at the roasting mill, where you see the smoke, literally a major smokestack happening at the roaster.
So, Walter, if you do it the oven method, you still have to kind of check it every now and again and stir it, right?
Yes, and that's why I said my favorite method is the popcorn method, because I can just give it to someone else and they'll do it for me. I don't have to watch it. But with the microwave, the oven, and the frying pan, there is constant watching in terms of and stirring. Otherwise, as indicated by this particular roast here, I'm getting better at now things are evening out a little bit more, but you'll get one side of the beans burnt badly and then the other side being kind of half done. Now, if I didn't get into the popcorn phase of it, I could have gotten a lot more even roast on this. But this is actually going to turn out not too bad after it's all said and done. I don't know if you want to try drinking this after we're done with this, but it's going to turn out pretty good. And the other thing that what you find in the roasting is that as I indicated earlier, there are all these different grades of coffee beans. The prime is the smallest, number one's next big, and then fancy, and then extra fancy by size of beans. when you have all these different sizes of beans in one batch, even if you were to stir the beans, then you're going to have uneven roasting too, because they do burn faster for the smaller ones.
So how does the commercial person roast the coffee, Walter?
Generally, the commercial roasters have, you know, roaster size from whether 1 pound size or 20 pounds or 50 pounds or 100 pounds or 500 pounds. They have, you know, very huge roasters that basically keep the beans rotated and mixed. And so the roasts are done, you know, with even heat pretty much throughout. And so,
So eventually, Samurai Coffee Company is going to have their own roaster. Is that
well,
correct?
as you can see, I'm practicing real hard right now. Well, you know, right now what we're doing is, you know, we grew coffee for many generations. We process our coffee all the way through the parchment stage, and I do send my coffee off for hulling and then getting it into the green stage, having it graded. We just began, we have a certified kitchen now, an approved certified kitchen, so we do bag our own coffee. We grind our own coffee, we bag our own coffee. So these are bags that literally were bagged by my wife. And so the next step that I'd like to get into is roasting, but that won't happen for maybe another year or two. I need some more practice, Jack. But you see, after we're at this stage, it does take a little while. But if I didn't,
Is that getting to be like an espresso or?
well, some of them are. Well, I made some comments about size of beans. One way you can do this is actually you can have prime and extra fancy, or maybe number 1 and fancy mixed to have combination of a smooth taste and a fuller-bodied coffee. So you can do a kind of a mixture that way, pure Kona coffee, but a mixture of different flavors into one cup. The other thing that you can think of is, you mentioned the espresso, but you can almost have different flavors coming out of a cup of coffee by the different roast in the same bag that's ground up for brewing. So generally, what you'll hear is that the lighter roast, the medium roast, will be a little more maybe mellow taste to the coffee when you taste a medium roast. When you get into a darker roast, it becomes a stronger, richer taste, stronger taste. And so if you want kind of a combination, then you can actually do, a combination of roast in a particular bag for different taste of the coffee, rather than a, one taste because of one roast. So, even though you say, well, some of these look like espresso, you maybe have a tinge of, you have different tastes coming out of the different roasted beans.
Oh, that's looking pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, it'll get caught up, because when they all turn black, they can't turn anymore. So they get caught up. It looks pretty good.
So Walter, how many acres of coffee plants do you have, or trees?
Well, I've got 2 areas. One area is trees that my grandparents started back in 1910, as I indicated. And the one that I planted behind, right behind my house, I have about a little over 1.5 acres, not quite 2 acres. The one that I have behind my house is are very big trees. And this is the one that we all use ladder to pick. I have 3 children that help in picking, and we have outside pickers as well. My mom is 2nd generation coffee, and last year I'd say she picked about 75 bags at 88. So she has a few ideas about what makes good Kona coffee.
So when is the harvesting period for the Kona coffee?
Well, you know, this year, I think what we'll be seeing is that we'll have quite a few people trying to get pickers around this November, December, because I think all of Kona will pretty much ripen at one time, and coffee won't wait for you. If I were to leave this branch unpicked for another week, they'll be overripe. So they don't wait for you. And especially if it rains, the beans will basically get soft and they'll fall off. So everybody's on a rush. When it's ready to pick, it's got to be picked. Now, the thing that you need to do also is cool off your beans. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not leave it in the frying pan any longer. Now this definitely looks like most of the beans are in the so-called dark to darkish roast. Now when this cools off, what we could do is we could actually have the students taste some of these beans, the ones that are dark roasted and the others that are more lighter roast, and you'll notice that there is a distinct difference in taste for the different roasts. And when you cup the coffee, it does come out different as well. Okay, okay, so anyway, the disadvantage of oven and microwave is that generally it's harder to even get it even. At least you have a little more control with the frying pan, with constant stirring. With the microwave, it's not as easy. And the oven, you can probably get a little more even roast, but it again takes constant attention. Whereas the popcorn popper, you decide the roast that you want based on how long you roast, because you can't control the temperature of the roast on the popcorn popper because it's already set. So what you need to do is you need to basically look at when you want to stop. And you know, say for example, if you took it out like this and you say, oh, that's too light, you can actually throw it back into the popcorn popper and start it up again and continue roasting it to the level you like. So popcorn popping is much easier. It is constant stirring. And the other advantage on the popcorn popper is that it does blow out all the silver skin as it's roasting. Whereas in this method, the silver skin is actually along with the beans. Now, what I could have done with the frying pan method is that the silver skin that's on the beans, as I roast, I can actually literally blow with my breath to blow it out, or to get the silver skin out. Otherwise, the silver skin is along with the beans here. And the silver skin, to some degree, adds a little bitterness to the taste of coffee.
So Walter, you're saying that a bag of cherries, now how many pounds does a bag of cherries weigh, the regular bag?
Well, when I say one bag, I'm making reference to a 100-pound sack. You know, you can put a bag, a big size bag, to 120 pounds or 110. But when I made the conversion from 100 pounds, one bag, I'm making a conversion of 100 pounds of red cherry to 23 pounds of parchment to 18 pounds of green to 15 pounds of roasted beans.
So what is the record in terms of the number of bags picked by an individual in one day? Is there an Alex Guinness Book of Records on how many bags of cherry that has been picked in Kona?
Well, actually, we used to hear a lot of numbers in the old days than we hear nowadays, because, for example, my brother claimed that he picked, 9 bags in a day. But at that time, for example, the entire branch would be all red and not have as much leaves on it. So essentially what it was, we called scrape ends. So you had your basket and got your hands and basically just ripped the coffee beans into your basket as fast as you could. from as early in the morning as you could to late as you could. And, you know, 600, 700, 800 pounds. You know, if you talk to some old-time Kona coffee farmers, you'll hear 5 bags is a fairly common amount to pick. Nowadays, it's very hard to hear people saying they're picking 5 bags or 6
So
bags.
Walter, if I was to go to Kona and work on your coffee fields, and if I picked a bag of cherries, how much will you pay me?
Well, depends on how much branches you broke and well, the going rate is, you know, it depends. The going rate may be somewhere between 30 to 50 cents, you know. Different people have different rates, and, you know, it depends on the size of your trays, how much production you have, you know, what's the ease of picking, and that's what it is. And the price of Kona coffee has not really stabilized because, you know, last year I forgot what it started out with, but it was probably around $1.10, and it ended up being $0.70 a pound, bringing your coffee cherries to the mill. This year it started at about $1.10, and it seems like it's going up a little higher. Generally, in the beginning of the season, the crop doesn't have the high quality coffee beans, you know, the drought, and so the beans are generally smaller. So the price started at $1.20, but I think it's kind of on an upward move right now. So it depends. You know, this is a market driven issue. So the more the demand for it, the higher price will go. Question back there.
So now, once you've got the coffee beans roasted, then what's the next part?
Okay. The next one is basically getting the coffee ground up and ready for brew. So again, there's different ways you can have it ground, depending on how you're going to brew your coffee. There are different grinders. One thing I regret is I forgot to bring a particular burr grinder that I had that I was going to demonstrate to you. And this particular grinder is an electric grinder, and it's a burr grinder. Now, the difference between a burr grinder and a blade grinder is something like this. What let me just pull this over here and see if we can do a little demonstration here. A blade grinder looks just like this. See if we can get the camera right on this. So you can see that there's basically 2 blades, and if I were to put my beans in here, and there's a safety device here, so it'll go on only after it's fit in properly, and there's a little switch that goes on. Need to put it flat here, and after it's in the right position, oops, I unplugged it at the same time.
I think you got to plug it in a little bit more. There you go.
Tight enough. There we go. So you can see that there is a, can you see that motion there? It's a blade grinder. Now, I'll be bold enough to...
Walter, maybe we can get the Elmo, because I've got this other one, if you want to
okay.
get the Elmo here.
One is the blade grinder, and then the other one's called burr. And Jack can show you on his Elmo the burr, and if you have a close-up on that, you'll notice that the blade is different. And the difference between the blade grinder and the burr grinder is this. The blade grinder will chop the beans up, whereas the burr grinder will literally grind the beans. And the advantage of the burr grinder is that it will give you a very even grind. So if you want a coarse grind, you put it at coarse, and then the size of the grounds will come out even. If you want a fine grind, it comes out even. So the burr grinder has an advantage in that it gives you an even grind, as opposed to a blade grinder. It depends on the blade contacting the beans. The other thing is that with the I don't think I'll show this one on the any more demonstration, but essentially the blade grinder, the disadvantage is that it'll cause a lot of very, very fine grounds. And it may be a disadvantage in that when you make your coffee, if you make French press, if you make your coffee with a brew with a French press, then you can have a lot of fine dust in all of your coffees. That's a disadvantage to some degree. So it depends, but it'll do the job, okay? If you use a filter, for example, the fine grind may not be a problem because the filter will basically capture all the fine grounds. But it's very convenient to use this particular one. So let me just use this, just kind of show you just a little of this. Okay, they're all set. And you can basically decide how fine a grind you get on this one here. So you can kind of take a shot of that. You can kind of see what happens. It doesn't take long. And so if we start looking at the whole scenario of our process here, if you had green beans, you roasted it with the popcorn popper. I'm not going to say with the frying pan tonight. And then you had your fresh roasted coffee bean. You grind your coffee, and then you start brewing. Okay, so those are a couple of ways you can do it at home. There are small, inexpensive grinders, whether it is by hand grinding or by electric grinders, Burr electric grinders, or electric blade grinders. Okay. And the advantage is this, that as I said, the fresher the coffee, the fresher the food, the better tasting they are. And so, although these bags are sealed, they're not so-called fresh roasted. So if you were able to get your hands on some green beans and roast your own, grind your own, and brew your own, you'll get the freshest coffee. Okay. Now, one of the things that that happens after you roast the coffee, and then before grinding them like this, I just wanted to make some comments about the beans. The beans that are in this plate that we just took out of the frying pan is now in the process of gassing. There's a lot of gassing that the beans go through. So if you look at this bag, this particular bag, a little pinhole was not put in, and therefore you can see how much gassing took place. My wife bagged this one day before yesterday afternoon, and you can see how much gassing occurred on this one. And she forgot to put a pinhole on this one here, but I didn't want to put a pinhole just to give you an idea what happens with the beans. Now, the reason I want to point out this concept of gassing is this, that many of the packages today that have coffee beans in, and this was specifically designed for coffee beans, is that you'll see a valve just like this. This is what they call a degassing valve, and the sole purpose of this degassing valve is to allow the gas to escape from the bag, or else the bag will tear. That's the only reason. And you can see even in this particular bag, even with the degassing valve, there's a slight bulge in it. And so what happens is that freshness means that you don't have oxygen working on the beans or the oil on the beans. So when you have coffee put in this kind of bagging, particular bagging, with the degassing valve, that has only a one-way direction for the gas, out only, not in, then to some degree, as the gas expanded like this bag, then it expelled a lot of the oxygen. So there is not as much oxidation happening on the the beans. So it's kind of the natural process is helping to preserve the coffee is what I'm telling you. So if you understand that this is a degassing valve, it's on out only, and then it is sealed now. And these bags are sealed so much so that, you know, there's no way air goes in or out, as indicated by these bags right here. So now what we're talking about is, you know, how do you keep your coffee fresh? And to some degree, the designers of bags have helped you keep the coffee as fresh as possible or as long as possible.
So Walter, if you didn't have that valve there, or if you didn't put a needle hole in it, the gas would build up so much it'll actually burst the bag.
Yes, basically, as you can see, it's pretty much reached its limit. Yes, that's why the sole purpose of the valve is just to make sure that the bags don't burst. And it also helps expel whatever oxygen was in there at the time they were put in. Because when you put it in, you're not trying to fill air with the coffee, but whatever is in there, you know, much of it will be expelled. So it's not a vacuum seal bag, but it is what I consider a vacuum seal bag because of that expulsion of oxygen.
Okay, Walter, then maybe you'd want to start showing us how to do some brewing real quick like.
Okay. Let's see. Actually, what I did was I already did some perking of coffee here. So, you know, the reason I'm perking is this, that a lot of people are doing it with filters, drip. That seems to be the most common. And when I started my coffee business at this stage, I just assumed everybody perked their coffee. That's the only way I knew. But I didn't realize that it's almost hard to find a percolator in the market anymore because everybody brews. But my mother-in-law thinks that, you know, perk coffee makes a much better coffee than drip coffee. She used the very same coffee, did the brewing at our house and her house, and she said ours always tasted better. So my wife gave her a percolator and a good grinder. But perk coffee, essentially what it is that this one is already brewed. And this one is already a done deal. So essentially what it is that it's a little hot, but that's okay. You've got to put your water in to a 10-cup brew in this particular case. And I always measure my coffee grounds by weight. I want a consistent brew, so I do it by the fraction of an ounce. All of these bags are bagged with a fraction of an ounce detector scale, so they got to be accurate. So when I brew, whether it's a 2-cup brew or whether they're a 10-cup brew here, it's measured. So it's not us heaping or tightly packed or loosely packed. It's measured. And, you know, it's kind of hard to do at most homes, but this is what I do. So the amount of grounds that were put in here was a particular weight to brew. And it's a very simple process to brew with a percolator. And some of you might want to try this. Try brewing your coffee with a drip, and then try brewing your coffee with a percolator, and see if you can find that there's a difference in the taste. With the drip method, some disadvantages are this, that the filter, the natural filter or the treated filter will change the taste of the coffee. So, you know, as the book said in one particular case, 95% of your coffee is water. So use filtered water, use good water. And then when you do it, don't get your agents in it to change the taste of the coffee, and that is the filter. So the recommended filter in your drip is the gold filters. A little more expensive, but cheaper in the long run. Perking is another method. And then the French press is another method, which I should have, I know what I'm going to do here.
Well, Walter, you know, it's 8 o'clock now, so
Yes.
maybe while you're doing some of your brew, we'll put the phone numbers on, and those of you who are watching us, we are on live this evening, and if you want to ask Walter any questions regarding Kona coffee, please give us a call. The numbers are on the screen, 974 7726, 974-7727 on the Big Island. And for those of you who are watching us from Maui, Oahu, and Kauai, and possibly Molokai and Lanai, you can call us collect at 961-9046. So if you have any questions, please give us a call. We do have a caller. Will the caller let us know where you're calling from and go ahead with the question, please?
Yes, sir. Doctor, I call from Pahoa.
Yes.
I want to find out how you peel those skin of the coffee, please.
Okay. How do you take the parchment off the parchment coffee, Walter?
Okay, are we talking about the red skin or are we talking about the parchment skin?
The red skin, please.
The red skin.
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, there is a machine called a pulper.
Pulper?
Yes,
Yes.
it's called a pulper, and basically you feed this red cherries into a little chute, and then as the cylinder peels off the red skin, your seeds will go in the other direction. So if you have a tub, it'll fall right into the tub. The other way is you got to use your hands one by one.
Oh. If you have a coffee tree, you have to buy those machines yourself, or
No.
you have a place you can send it to.
Actually, let me ask you this now. How much coffee red cherry do you have?
We have 2 trees.
Okay. My suggestion is that you get your relative help you pinch the seeds out, and in no time you'll get all those seeds out.
By hand.
By hand.
Okay, thank you very much. In Kona, you have a place you can send it to, right?
Yes, generally you can, but generally the quantities are, depending when you have 2 trees. If you have 200 pounds from 2 trees,
Yes.
that'll be pretty good. If you have, 4 pounds from 2 trees, then you're faster doing it by hand. But yes, there are places that you can do it, yes.
Thank you very much. You guys are doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller from Pahoa. We have another caller. Will you let us know where you're calling from and go ahead with the question, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm calling from Kona, and
Yes.
great program, you guys. Walter, there's the question on your percolator. What's the measurements? You didn't say the exact measurements per cup, say. Say if it's a 10 cup, how many
Yes.
ounces would you put in there?
Okay, generally what happens is this, that with Kona coffee, there's a difference with the different coffees that you use. With the Kona coffees, generally, let's take U-Ban or Folgers. If you're used to making coffees with drip or whatever it is, try using half of Kona coffee, whether you perk or drip. Try starting with that level and then adjust up or down for strength. Because you know that Kona coffee is a little stronger than the canned coffee or the supermarket coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you start with about half. Now, what we're doing is, based on what I've learned from people's liking from around the world, is that people that come from Canada generally like their coffee a little weaker and their tea strong. They like it a little weaker than Americans. So what we do at our shop is that we brew it at 85 cups on a pound with perking. So we use our scale so that whether I brew a 10 cup or a 80 cup brew, whatever it is, I just use the conversion of 85 cups on a pound. So some of the students here had sampled the coffee, so the one that you tasted tonight is an 85 cup per pound brew with perking.
Okay.
So whatever you do from there, you just kind of figure out there's 16 ounces in a pound, and you just make a conversion there. So if you have some gram scales, my recommendation is this, that you would use your gram scale to see each time you brew so that your brew is consistent.
All right, okay. I don't have a scale or anything, but
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe you measure by whatever.
Well, the other way to do it for most of you at home is that you probably have a really good spoon, not the spoon that kind of shapes like a wok, but one that's got a really good top surface where you put it to the top, fill it up, and you level it out, pack it down a little bit, and then you try and figure out whether 2 cups or 1.5 cups of water go with that particular spoon. And once you have figured your ratio and your taste buds, you never change from there. So you want to do a 6 cup, then you work backwards. You say, this is what's going to make 1.5 cups of this. And you
Then
start
again,
going that way.
Walter, it depends on the coffee beans. Some coffee beans are very dense, while others are not quite as dense. So a good coffee has a very dense grade. Is that correct, Walter?
Yeah, essentially what, what Jack is talking about here is in the process, which really I didn't describe, is that, go ahead, we'll have it here. In the process, we talked about grading the green beans earlier. And grading the green beans was initially by size and shape. And one was prime, number one fancy, extra fancy by size, and then peaberry. But there is also what we call a gravity table, densimeter table. And essentially what it does, it shakes off the lighter beans from the heavier beans. Last year, Kona had a very poor beginning crop because of the drought. And we had a lot of floaters. And so what it meant at that time is that the beans were not able to develop fully. And so the beans became light density. So the floaters meant this, that if you soaked your red cherries into the bucket of water, the beans literally floated, floaters. And so, it does taste coffee, but it doesn't have the full flavor to the coffee.
Right, I think I've tasted some of that.
And then also you have to make sure that the coffee cherries are really ripe and red when you pick them instead of picking them green. Is that correct also, Walter?
That's right, because when the coffee is in a green state, you basically have a lot of acid, and then they'll come out bitter. So this is the disadvantage of machine harvesting, because you'll have more of the green beans picked, and whether the machine is able to then sort out the green one from the red beans after it's dried in the green process, depending on the reliability of that, will determine how.
Walter, we have two callers. Well, thank you for calling from Kona. We have two additional callers, so will the first caller let us know where you're calling from, and go ahead with the question, please.
Oh, great show, Dr. Jack.
Well,
I'm calling from Waipahu.
Okay.
My husband likes to cold brew his coffee. He lets it sit for 2 or 3 days, and it doesn't taste like espresso. So I just wondered what kind of recommendation, in terms of the, proportion, water to
for cold
beans,
iced
the
coffee,
grind
like
and the roast, he would recommend.
Walter?
Okay, when you say, are we talking about iced coffee? We're not talking about iced coffee, are we?
Well, cold coffee.
No, soaking the ground beans in
Yes.
cold water to.
Well, on something like this, basically what I'm trying to do when I said I'm doing 85 cups on a pound, I don't have in the store one that's 60 cups, one that's 70, 180, 190, 200 or something like that. But if I did have them, I would have every customer real happy, because they're going to be happy with a particular brew. So this is, I guess, what the point I'm making is personal. So what you have to figure out is what ratio of grounds to water would best fit your particular needs or your husband's needs. That's what it comes down to. So, for example, when I said that British generally like their coffee a little weaker than Americans, what I found is Japanese from Japan like it stronger than Americans. So if I have 10 Japanese tourists come into my store and sample my coffee, I can predict that 9 out of 10 will say it's a little weak, because that's their particular palate, because they're used to it. And then if they're from Italy, then they're going to tell me my coffee's water. So, it depends on what you like. And you have to kind of experiment. Basically what it comes down to is you got to experiment and see what you come up with. And then once you figured it out, then you try to find the best way to keep the consistency with grounds to beans. And I know that most of you don't have these scales at home, so my recommendation is, whatever spoon you have, a very good measuring spoon that you can use all the time, figure out how much grounds that you go with and how many cups of water. And once you figure you're going to make 2 cups of water with your grounds, then you always use that particular ratio.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling from Waipahu on Oahu. We have another caller. Will you let us know where you're calling from, and go ahead with the question, please?
Hi, I'm calling from Hilo.
Yes.
And my question, Walter, is you said that in the old days that the cherries on the branch used to turn red all at one time, so it was easy to strip. What's different today that makes the red turn green at different times during the season?
Okay,
Well, you know, yes, to some degree, I think the weather pattern has changed. I think right now we also have drip irrigation that kind of so-called interferes with nature. Because what happens is this, that when the budding of the flower, the tree happens, is this, that if there is no rainfall, there is no flower blooming. So the buds, what it's going to do is if you don't have rainfall, the little buds are going to get bigger and they're all going to get caught up with one another. And when it rains very heavily, 10 days exactly after the rainfall, it just blooms. And this is where I think Kona snow came from. So to some degree, I think in the old days, there were more Kona snow pictures than we do have today because, you know, drip irrigation kind of messes up with nature. And so the blooming actually stretches out. So there's less per bloom over a longer period. Whereas in the old days, the trees were bigger, first of all. And I think that kind of changes its nature too. When you have big old trees, they've got their own ways of figuring out how they want to develop their beans, whereas now the trees are generally smaller. Personally, I'm kind of looking forward to and not looking forward to my main crop that's coming up in about a couple of months, a month and a half or so, because it's going to be good because the concentration of picking is going to be very close. But yet, you know, you got to pick the beans before it falls and rains. And, you know, having available pickers at that time may play a crucial role. So I think the weather patterns have something to do. The other one is what we do to the trees and what we do with irrigation that kind of changes that, I think, a little bit.
Okay,
you know, the old days, many people bragged about having 100 pounds of coffee per tree. You don't hear that anymore.
Okay, does that answer the question from Hilo? I guess it does. We have 2 additional callers. Will the next caller let us know where you're calling from and go ahead with the question, please?
Hello, yes, I'm calling from Paradise Park.
Okay.
I tuned in late. How do they make decaf coffee?
Okay, Walter, how they make decaf?
Yes, actually there are several processes of decaffing coffee. Personally, I don't have my coffees decaf. You know, I do have only pure Kona coffee, 100%. No blends, no decaf, no flavors. Decaffing can be done in one of 2 general major processes. And one is a chemical treatment. You know, methylene chloride is used to basically neutralize the caffeine. You know, nobody knows for sure exactly what the effects are, but I'd prefer not doing it. And it also changes the taste of coffee. But you know, for those of people that have medical problems that cannot handle caffeine, you know, they just have to have decaf coffee. The other process is a Swiss water washing method. And that is literally washing the beans and then rinsing the beans when it's in the green form and basically trying to wash out the caffeine from the beans. And they need very large quantities of beans for a particular batch. But it too changes the taste of coffee. So there's different ways that you can decaf it. The Swiss water wash, there's really nothing here. I think you can go to Canada for Swiss water washing process. Personally, I don't know, you know, where you can get your other method done.
Does that answer the question in Paradise Park?
Yeah, thank you. I work in a hotel restaurant and I see a lot of people asking for decaf, and I just wondered how it was decapped. You know?
Oh, I see.
So it's a chemical thing. So
now you can explain a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for calling from Paradise Park. We have another caller. Could you let us know where you're calling from and go ahead with the question, please?
Hi, it's a very interesting show. I'm calling from Lanai City.
Uh-huh.
And I would like to plant a couple of trees. Are there any particular plants that I should
buy, and where can I buy it?
Are we talking about trees? Did I hear trees?
Yes.
Yes. Actually, the most common ones are, Arabica beans. Guatemalan is pretty much what grows in Kona. It's referred to as Guatemalan, and there's different kinds. Caturra. Personally, I kind of like the Guatemalan, which is what I'm having here. Most of Kona's went with Guatemalans, and I believe it's a much hardier tree. The quality of the beans are also better. So, for example, if you have the Robusta beans, and I don't know who we have Robusta beans in Hawaii if at all, but Robusta beans are those beans that trees that will produce coffee primarily for canning purposes. The taste is not that flavorful, but I guess the concept is like canning tomatoes versus table tomatoes, that you can can these particular types of tomatoes, but not really good for eating with your salad, in your salad. Same thing with coffee. So you can get a hold of seeds, the Guatemalan seeds. Heck, I got a bunch of seeds here. We can just mail this to you.
That'd be great.
Well, maybe you can give Walter a call. I don't know if I should, if you give your phone number, Walter, you'll probably get inundated with phone calls, but if you want to give your phone number where she can get those seeds, well, maybe you can...
yeah, I'd be glad to send you some seeds. In fact, everybody that comes into to my shop, what I do is, whether from Japan or Canada or Alaska, and there's a lot of people growing coffee all over the world. You won't believe that, but they're growing right into the apartments, and I give them, a dozen seeds.
So,
and they
Walter,
take them home.
actually, you sell some of the parchment coffee now. If you had the parchment coffee, you can actually plant that, and will it grow?
Yeah, these parchment that we just showed on the desk here, they're all live seeds. So, I just give a dozen away. It's just kind of fun to have people have a little hobby when they go home with Kona coffee.
Well, why don't you give your phone number, and someone may give you a call, Walter.
Well, I got one in Kailua. My shop in Kailua is 331-1444. So,
What was that again?
331
331
1444.
1444. Okay. Does that answer the question from Lanai?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. We'll take another caller. Would you let us know where you're calling from, and go ahead with the question, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm calling from Pahoa.
Okay.
Yeah, last year I tried to process my own coffee. I have one tree in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And after I picked the beans, the red cherries, and squeezed the seeds out,
Mm-hmm.
and then you ferment it in water, but I didn't know how long to do it. And after a while, it started to smell real bad, so I ended up throwing it away.
Okay, Walter, how long do you ferment the seeds right out of the cherries?
Yeah, my recommendation is, 8 hours or so, and then the less water you put into the tub, the better the reaction, because what we're talking about is bacterial action, and that's where the smell comes from. But what you do is, just soak it for about 8-10 hours, and you don't have to have it completely off, because the major purpose of taking it off is make it easier drying. And it is also said that when you do ferment it the right amount, it also adds body to the flavor of coffee. But I would say put it in a little bucket or tub or however much coffee you have, and don't really add water. Just use its own juice, cover it up, kind of like if you got a bucket, just cover it up with a couple of blankets or whatever, or cloth, and then about 8 hours later, just go there, rinse, wash, and throw it on your drying platform. And try to get it dried as soon as possible, because if it's not drying for a long time, then the fermentation is basically going to continue, and then pretty soon what you'll have is sour beans. And when you drink your coffee, it's going to affect your taste.
I hope that answers the question. We have 2 additional callers, so I'm going to ask the next caller to let us know where you're calling from, and go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, I'm calling from Kona.
Okay.
I don't understand how you get from parchment to green.
Okay, Walter, what do you do to get the parchment off to get your green beans?
Well, there is a machine called a huller, and those are generally at the mill. So if you have 100 pounds of parchment, then you take it to the mill, and they'll have it hauled for you. The other way is this: the old-fashioned way is you put these parchment in a bucket or some tin can on the bottom, and my mom always had this big guava post about 3 inches in diameter and about 6 feet long, and basically just out there just like pounding mochi. And you keep pounding and pounding and pounding, and pretty soon it separates the parchment skin from the green beans. And then later on you go out there in the breeze and basically let the air fan off all that light skin, and then the beans will fall into your catchment. So that's the old-fashioned way.
I hope that answers the question from Kona, and we'll take the next caller. Will you let us know where you're calling from, and go ahead with the question, please?
I'm calling from Kona.
Okay.
To Walter, yeah?
Yes.
You know, to decaffeinate the coffee, the old timers up in Kona, as I recall, used to use the eggshell. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, I've heard of the eggshell, but you know, in terms of decaf, I'm not really familiar. You know, basically the comments I made are just basically coming from a book that I read. So I'm not sure, you know, exactly how it works, because they're saying that they would wash it, they would split the beans in, you know, open and then try to wash it out. But I don't know how the process really works by, you know, just water washing. So
yeah, they normally used to boil it with the coffee like the percolator. You know, with the grinds.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I used to see my auntie do.
Okay.
Up on the slope of Hualalai.
Yeah, that actually kind of makes sense, because when you boil the beans, when it's still in the green state, you're actually now taking out a lot from the beans. And you probably have to dry it after you boil it.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for calling from Kona. Walter, I'd just like to mention that the Kona Coffee Cultural Festival has a cookbook, and maybe if I can have the Elmo. This cookbook is really wonderful because it shows you all different kinds of recipes using coffee. And if you're interested in this cookbook, this is in addition to the Focus on Agriculture cookbook. But here's some numbers here that you can call: 326-7820 or fax 326-5634. And if you're on the internet, they have a web page at www.konacoffeefest.com, and boy, you can learn everything there is to know about coffee if you hit that web page. And also you can get information from this email address at info@konacoffeefest.com. So if you're on the computer, maybe you might write those addresses down and check out the web page, and you'll really learn a lot about coffee and also this Kona Coffee Cookbook. Walter, do you have anything else that you want to say in the few minutes that we have left?
Well, I just want to make some quick comments. One is that I think the guy in the back room, I'm going to hire him as a roaster, because if you can get a clear-up shot on this, he's got a Vienna roast, and this looks wonderful. I think if we ground this one up and made coffee, I think you in the audience would enjoy this. Secondly, in terms of storing your coffee, to me, the best way is to use something like this. Some of you have seen this in your wine, where you actually suck the air out, vacuum sealing it. And you know that oxygen is the one that oxidizes food, which causes rancidness in your oils, fish, nuts, coffee, and so on.
Walter, I'm going to have to cut you. We've run to that portion of the class where we've run out of time. I'd like to thank Walter Kunitaki from Samurai Coffee Company in Kona for joining us this evening. We hope that you'll join us next Thursday evening, when we'll have the Hilo High School cafeteria cook on board, and they'll be doing some cooking for huge groups. So this is Jack Fujii saying thank you for watching, and we hope that you'll join us next Thursday evening.